Good evening, Juanita Phillips with ABC News. Emergency services have described the deadly weather that's hit the New South Wales coast as cyclonic, with heavy rain and wind gusts not seen in a decade. 3 people have been killed in the Hunter Valley. Homes have been washed away, roofs blown off, power lines strewn everywhere, and thousands of trees torn down. And authorities are warning that conditions will remain severe well into the night. The worst of the wind gusts have hit 135 kilometres an hour. More than 300 millimetres of rain has fallen in some areas of the Hunter and more than 120 millimetres in Sydney. The SES has answered more than 5,000 calls and more than 200,000 homes and businesses remain without power. The worst of the impact is in the Hunter region and Central Coast, where residents have been advised to stay inside after conditions worsened again this afternoon. Our reporter Jackson Vernon is in Maitland. Jackson, the impact of this East Coast low seems worse than anyone had anticipated.
Well, Juanita, they're describing this as a once-in-a-decade storm. Many residents say that it's even worse than the 2007 storm, which hit the region and famously caused the tanker Pasha Bulker to run aground in Newcastle. Now, while there were warnings in place on Sunday, it's the intensity of this storm and the devastation that it has wrought right across the region that have really shaken people and resulted in some tragic consequences.
The floodwaters rose fast and flowed furiously through the township of Dungog, which is now cut off. Several houses were knocked clean off their footings. It's believed 2 elderly men and 1 elderly woman were in one of the homes that were swept away.
Probably more severe than it was anticipated, so clearly the consequences are quite significant across New South Wales, and it is clear that we're in the midst of very challenging weather.
To the east in Stroud, the showground was swamped. Cars and caravans were trashed. People feared missing were thankfully later found. One family spent 2 hours on the roof of their house.
It came without any warning. Within probably about 5 minutes, we had a metre deep in the house. Yeah, a metre deep, and we could only just get out of the house.
Dean Woolley was rescued from his property by firefighters.
They put a ladder down onto our veranda, and we walked up the ladder onto the roof of the fire truck, and then the fire truck back out of the floodwater.
Further south in Newcastle, houses were halved as trees came crashing down.
We were bounced out of bed by the tree coming through the roof.
Our lottery was being alive.
Yeah.
Very lucky people.
The Central Coast was also hit hard. Boats battered against the shoreline. This man, who spent the night on his boat at Hardy's Bay, was one of over 60 separate flood rescues. Many travelling today ignored warnings about driving through floodwaters.
Oh, we won't get stuck. No, we'll be right.
The next 12 hours is a difficult period, particularly in the Hunter and those northern parts. We need to limit any non-essential travel and ask that you never, ever drive, walk, play or get into floodwaters. If there is floodwater, do not enter it. It is not worth it.
The wild weather is set to ramp up again tonight. An emergency alert warning has been sent to over 100,000 homes in Newcastle.
And Jackson, with these warnings for the night ahead, how are people in the Hunter preparing?
Well, the flood warning remains in place throughout the whole Hunter region this evening, with rivers expected to rise. Here in Maitland, well, the streets are basically deserted. People are battening down the hatches, staying indoors, but it is further north to Dungog where the worst of that flooding has occurred. I mean, even today, we struggle to get into the Maitland area because many of those normal routes into the city were cut off by the flood waters. And we've just got some news to hand. Police don't believe that the 3 people killed were in any of the homes that washed away in Dungog.
Jackson Vernon with the latest there from the Hunter region.